can you shed a little more light? I mean, I would have thought that the Attorney General will be like the attorney of the government in any case, and that would also be advising the government in terms of what it needs to do. Doesn't it stops just at advising? I mean, isn't it left for the client, as it were, to take the advice?
No. So if that's just the situation, why did the Attorney General make it an issue? So if you advise a client to the best of your understanding and the client does not take to your advice, what do? You throw in the fire. So if you are the Attorney General, you advise the federal government to do the right thing, and the federal government demurs, what do? You throw in the towel. The problem, look, you are here, the former Minister of Energy or Power was here, and he was talking, waxing eloquent about the reforms in the power sector. A few days later, he had to resign. Whether he was forced to resign or he resigned voluntarily is yet to be determined, but he resigned. The problem with those who occupy public offices in Nigeria is that they loathe resigning when it is most appropriate to do so. So if the Attorney General is blaming legal practitioners, senior advocates for unethical conduct and behavior, I think that the office of the Attorney General is also complicit in the process.
Perhaps we should also see if there's a nexus with what we are already experiencing. Not quite far from now, we got this report about the prison condition, to the extent that we had to summarize, they had to do a particular segment for that particular problem. We realized that over 40,000 inmates awaiting trials are in most of the prisons. Is there a nexus with what we're experiencing now when we talk about justice delivery in Nigeria?
Yes, there's a nexus, and indeed the CJN made mention of prison congestion too, particularly the high number of awaiting trial suspects or inmates vis-a-vis convicts already serving terms in prison. And she pointed out that that's also an indication that the criminal justice system is failing. The CJN, understood, as we should understand, that in the judicial process, the judge alone does not do everything. For instance, in the criminal trial, if those who are arraigned before a court are not brought to court by the prison service, there is nothing the judge can do about it. And that's what the CJN was pointing out, underscoring the need for synergy, the need for a comprehensive solution to the problem. And now I say that just to address the point you made about prison congestion as part of the problem afflicting the justice administration system in Nigeria, that the judiciary has a lot of problems, and we need to understand it. The judiciary has structural problems, it has ethical problems, it has operational problems. Some of the problems cannot just be solved by, just picking one strand and dealing with them. You pick prison, you deal with them. When you pick prison and you deal with them, so what are you going to do to the other, aspects in the chain? So when I talk about the structural problem, I speak about a situation whereby you have one judiciary that has a broad base. I've spoken about this before, even here. Now, when the person representing the Senior Advocate of Nigeria at the investiture was speaking, he was talking about appointing more justices to the Court of Appeal. So, at the appellate level, you have, at the last count, almost 100 justices now at the Court of Appeal, if not more. Now you have several divisions. Lagos has one, Ibadan has one, Akure has one, Ado-Ekiti, and so on and so forth. In fact, the idea is that every state must have a Court of Appeal. Now you have one Supreme Court of about 16 or 17 judges who constitutionally can be 21, deciding all these appellate cases. So the judiciary is like a cone. It's like a pyramid. You have a very tiny summit, and then you have a very broad base. how can that kind of judiciary function efficiently? So you now have a problem, and the CJN didn't mention that in the Supreme Court, for instance, criminal appeals may languish there for an average of 2-3 years before determination. Even criminal appeals, when justice is said that to justice delayed, is justice denied. That happens in the Supreme Court. So the way to deal with this problem is not just to pick one and say you need a comprehensive solution to an integrated problem.
Nigeria is not the only country that has a pyramid structure in its judicial system, as it were. And one would think that that's what should actually make sense. That not every case should get to the Supreme Court. Not every case should get to the appeal court. And hopefully at the appeal court, if any case is going to go up at all, most cases should have been resolved. Isn't that the ideal thing that should obtain?
That's the ideal thing. But politicians, sometimes with the aid of people in the judicial sector, bar and bench, also aid politicians to also compound the problem. Recently, gubernatorial election petition appeals that used to end at the Court of Appeal, by thinking with the Constitution, were now made to go to the Supreme Court. So you now have 3 layers: tribunal, appeal tribunal, Supreme Court. Why? Because some people were thinking that, Court of Appeal judges were becoming billionaire judges, so let's bring them here. And the Supreme Court under Section 232, original jurisdiction, is very clear. It also has under Section 233, the appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Now, what you then have at the end of the day is that because the Supreme Court is always busy dealing with constitutional cases and all that, dispute between the federal government and state, another offshore, onshore dichotomy may be on its way to the Supreme Court for another revisitation soon. Because that's what it's always doing, it has little or no time for criminal appeals. Why do you then compound the problems by saying you must have 3 layers, when you can have 2 layers and have justice at the end of the day? So the point is that even before that situation was changed, Nigeria perhaps will be the only unitary federalism that will have this kind of structure, where all cases have the likelihood of going to one and the only Supreme Court. States do not have Supreme Court here in Nigeria, unlike in the United States. So what we then have is that every case conceivably can move from a magistrate court, particularly in criminal appeal, and snake its way through the labyrinth or gamut of the entire judiciary to the apex court.
Wow.
That is not how you run a judiciary. So when people talk about devolution of executive, legislative powers, they don't think that they should devolve judicial powers. And that's why I'm saying that people that talk about these matters, they just talk, they don't see these problems in their proper perspective. You need to think holistically.